Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Greenwood, and I am the Director of Student Financial Aid Services at Waubonsee Community College. And I also serve as our House Liaison and have fulfilled that role since the inception of this act. So I am honored to be your guest presenter today. Patty has been a phenomenal trainer since the inception of the House Act. So I hope to make her proud today. Today's topic is on the nuances of creating a standard operating procedure manual, understanding what it is and why it's important to have one. I also would like to share that this presentation does not provide an overview of Public Act 102-0083. Instead, this presentation is a primer to help you record or update your current written process to comply with the Act. If you are newer in this space, I would encourage you to visit the House Liaison Center that was previously shown on the last page and also included in the chat, as it does have many helpful resources designed to help you better understand and implement the Act at your institution. So today's agenda includes understanding the necessity of an SOP, the challenges that creep up that stall the writing process, some definitions in the space of instructions and processes, and then we'll dive into what you need to get started and perhaps incorporate if you've already begun creating an SOP for your house process at your institution. We'll wrap up with some tools and resources that you can check out that might make the process a little bit easier for you, and then end with some questions and discussions. I'll also add that I am your peer, and through trial and error, I've found the need for designing SOPs, FAQs, when initiating a new process to be extremely helpful, but I do not hail myself as an expert. So I'm just happy to share what I've done, as well as some research that I've compiled today for our needs. So why are SOPs necessary? Before we begin to answer this question, I'd like to get a sense of our audience today. Using the chat, if you could enter the office that you represent and how long you've held the responsibility as a house liaison at your institution, that'd be great. But if you're supporting the house liaison, you may not be the liaison yourself, you can also indicate that as well. So go ahead and just begin to enter that into the chat. And when it comes to a slow, we'll go ahead and hop into the necessity of SOPs. And I'll share that again, I'm a part of the financial aid office and I've been in this space for 3 years now. Okay, so we've got residence life, dean of students, housing, student retention, navigator, a lot of deans of student offices. Okay. As I suspected, this particular position lives in many different areas within colleges. So we have more outside of financial aid than in financial aid. So that's exciting. Okay, we have counseling and wellness as well, a couple of benefit navigators. Very good. Thank you, guys. Okay, so why is it necessary? SOPs serve as an excellent training tool that new colleagues can refer to ensure consistency of practice until they become acclimated with the process. It's also a great reference tool for those moments of brain fog, which I've dealt with myself, or to share with another institution who might have a need. Documenting your process helps to promote a systematic and consistent use practice, ensuring equitable practices when working with students. Additionally, when you follow your SOP, you significantly reduce your chances of errors and inconsistent use practice. So there are some common challenges, and putting together an SOP might sound easy on the surface, but we often encounter challenges that either stop us from starting the process or getting it down on paper and updating what we've already started or what someone else may have created. So next we're going to take a look at what some of those challenges are. So you may be familiar with the activity, a waterfall activity, as many of our earlier trainings have them. And so I actually really love this activity. So I'm going to ask you to enter your answer, but hold on for entering, like submitting it. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to answer the question, and then I'll ask everybody to hit submit, and then all of the responses will fall at the same time, or should. So the question for today is, what are your greatest challenges regarding the creation or updating your institution's SOP for its house process? So go ahead using the chat and enter your answer, and then I'll let you know when to submit it. Okay, so if you've already started entering, go ahead and submit. Okay, so lack of funding, time consuming, is a long process. Starting or having time to update it when one is made. Not having administrative support or funding. Lack of resources. What is required by law? Just clarity around that. Lots of unknowns requires many players across campus. Yep. Time and funding, coordination, staffing. Staffing is a very, very common challenge. Time management, lack of involvement. Okay, great. I suspected many of these things. So a couple of key themes that I think we can throw all of these responses under would be loss of institutional knowledge, time and bandwidth, perhaps writer's block, or a professional wordsmither, and resources. And we saw a lot of responses in the chat about resources. So the process may live inside your boss's head or the individual's head. And you may find yourself in the position that you are now fulfilling that role, and that information went with them. A loss of institutional knowledge is a widespread challenge. When you assume that you find yourself, you might find yourself data mining or trying to work backwards to figure out what the process entailed. You never have full certainty of what you've uncovered as far as the steps are concerned. And so that could be a little bit frustrating, especially if you're newer in this space. You might find yourself saying, I know the process like the back of my hand. I don't have the time. I'll write it down one day, but now it's just not a good time for me because of my other responsibilities. I found myself in this bucket as well, especially when it comes to reviewing and updating processes that predate me. However, if you're short-staffed or if you're acting in a capacity as the house liaison on top of your normal work, this statement might feel really real to you. You might have also found yourself saying, writing's not my strong suit, and I'm afraid that people might judge me for that. This may not be the norm, but it's definitely an Achilles heel for some individuals that can throw out the process of writing anything down. And then lastly, which many of you have identified with, is, you don't have the resources, including time, staff, budget, to make an SOP a reality right now. And if that resonates with you, please begin to advocate for help. One of the most common phrases that aid offices use when advocating for help is, we need to be able to determine and show administrative capability, especially for those who participate in federal student aid. And while there's certainly truth in that space, because of federal student aid and your president signing off on your program participation agreement, saying that you will demonstrate administrative capability, you can certainly use that same logic in this space in order to be able to execute and fulfill the mandate that is asked of us. We need to be able to demonstrate administrative capability and have the resources we need to do that job. And I know that's easier said than done, but your best weapon is your voice, and to use it often. So now I'm going to jump into some definitions. This might feel rudimentary, but I found in my experience that use of these terms can sometimes happen interchangeably. So I think it's good to have a primer of what a process versus a policy versus a procedure versus what is a SOP. And I'm also going to start to integrate some tools that you might consider as part of research or actually compiling an SOP as we move through these definitions. All right, so first, as we jump into the space, I just want to normalize researching and leveraging software to support your work. Sometimes it could just feel really overwhelming when you're sitting down to put pen to paper to feel like you have to do this lift all by yourself. And we're going to talk about stakeholders a little bit later, but there are a lot of helpful tools out there. And at the end, we'll talk about proper use of these tools. But if you struggle with writer's blocks or concerns regarding grammar, tools like Grammarly and ChatGPT can be helpful to refine your thoughts and statements. But first, let's look at what is a policy. Simply stated, it's a statement that informs how we comply with laws and regulations at the organizational level. According to ChatGPT, it's a formal statement or a set of guidelines established by an organization to guide decision-making actions and behaviors. Policies ensure consistency, compliance with laws and regulations, and alignment with the institution's mission and values. They provide a framework for how an organization operates, helping to maintain fairness, accountability, and efficiency. Okay. And so here's an example of a policy statement that you could adopt, or maybe just keep in the back of your mind as you're thinking about your own policy statement, jumping into the creation of an SOP. Or maybe you already have one and it may not have a policy statement, you could add it to it. So institution, just insert your institution's name, is committed to providing comprehensive wraparound services to support students in meeting their basic needs. Any student requiring assistance will have access to resources and support services to ensure their well-being and academic success. So again, a fancy statement that just kind of shows what your organization stance is on this particular practice. I feel like folks freeze up sometimes when you think about dealing with compliance of laws because there's a certain weight and gravity to it. So just keep in mind, again, this is not something that you should do in a vacuum. Writing policy shouldn't be, just you and you alone. You'll want to work with your stakeholders and, if available to you, your legal counsel. And I apologize. I just keep advancing when I'm not ready. All right. So I did mention that I use ChatGPT. You may or may not have dabbled in this space. You also may have noticed that I said to refine or to spruce up what you've written. The reason why I feel like when using a tool like ChatGPT, you don't want to necessarily use it to do the work for you, but perhaps use it as a tool to refine the work, to make it, wordsmith per se. So for this particular example that you're looking for, I gave ChatGPT a command to convert the following statement, which was my original thought, to provide wraparound services to any student needing resources to help meet their basic needs. That you probably could have made that your policy statement and been done with it. But if you wanted to sound a little bit more professional, I just wanted to show how ChatGPT can help you with that. And this is the output that it gave me. All right. So let's jump into what a process is. According to Merriam-Webster's definition of a process, it's a series of actions or operations conducing to an end. So I've provided some examples of our processes that we've deployed at Waubonsie as part of our house process. So one of our processes is to start at the beginning of each semester, sending out an email to all of our registered students. We use a software called Loom, letting them know that we have this service available to them and how to connect with us. So that is a standard practice that we do at the start of every term. The next process is setting up an automatic response that goes out to a student when they submit a self-referral or someone submits a referral on their behalf and includes the student's email address. So we've designed a web form that we embed in our email that we send out. We've also embedded it in our signature blocks when we're responding to students and our staffs, just to keep that presence of that form available to them. And if they need assistance with housing resources, they then can click on that form. Or if a colleague or a professor notices that they may be falling asleep in class or sleeping in their car, we encourage them to have a conversation with them first through our annual training. But if they're not in the space to be able to do that and still want to express concern, they then can use that link that's in the email distribution as well as in our signature blocks and on our website. Upon receipt of referral, we then deploy our next process of responding to the student, and we'll talk a little bit more about documenting that later. And then we'll follow up with an intake process that leads to an assessment of services needed and direct referral to either on-campus resources or community resources. And then we have another process which includes inputting all of the data that we gather from the intake process into our SIS, Student Information Systems, which we use Banner for reporting and follow-up outreach purposes. So each of these processes are outlined in the SOP. And essentially, like I said, we will say, an SOP is documenting all of your processes step by step. The next term that I want to get into that you probably hear a lot in this space are procedures. So dictionary.com's definition of a procedure is an act or manner of proceeding in any action or processes. And so you can see here, there's procedures around identifying our students, assessment, resource allocations, and follow-up. Okay, so each of these components are important to the process, but as we jump into the SOP portion, Google AI defines an SOP as a standard operating procedure is a detailed set of instructions for performing a specific task, focusing on the how to execute an action, while a policy and procedure manual outlines an organization's overall guidelines and rules, including both high-level policies defining what should be done and detailed procedures explaining how to carry out those policies. Essentially, an SOP is a smaller component of a larger policy and procedure manual that covers specific actions. So you can see that both process, policies, procedures all play a key role in the SOP, but the SOP is not your policy and procedure manual per se, because it may or may not include all of those components. It's essentially getting at the heart of the step-by-step. If I were to come in off of the street and never had a day of experience in your office, I should be able to read this SOP and understand how to execute your house process. Right. So now that we have a little bit of a primer on what each of those terms means, we're going to take a look at getting started. What exactly is it that you need to create or update your SOP? So you'll want to document every step of every process involved in your service model, hence documenting from A to Z. This can feel overwhelming, but there are tools that can assist with this. For example, Scribe. I was able to get my institution to support a subscription with Scribe, and it is a screen capture tool. So for example, if you are in your SIS system and you're inputting the data that you've collected from your interview with the student, you then can turn on the screen capture tool as you're moving through the process, and it's taking pictures of it for you. And it also has an SOP feature in Scribe, but there is a cost to it as well. So Definitions are critical to describing key terms and systems. And so in our SOP, we do define what at-risk means versus student experiencing homelessness. We describe what Banner is. We describe what each screen within Banner that is applicable to the process means. And so again, this gets back to having a tool that someone with no experience could look at and have a step-by-step of what all these things mean, as well as how to execute. Next, you want to define your methods of service delivery in your SOP. So does that include sending emails? Are you sending an email to a student issued email or their preferred email? Are you meeting with students via virtual platforms versus in person? Or will you offer a combination to meet their needs? Are you calling students? Are you text messaging students? Okay, so you'll want to specify how you're doing all of that. And we took it a step further because we use a combination of all except text messaging because we don't have access to text at Wabanzi just yet. But when you've identified your delivery methods, including some standard language that you'd like to share as well to ensure consistency in your SOP is very helpful as well. You'll also want to document your communication cadence, meaning if you are going to text your students, how often are you going to text and what exactly is the intent of the text, like what's the call of action? So documenting that. We actually just last semester created our process for outreach and follow-up because we wanted to be able to start measuring outcomes. So at midterm, we will reach out to students to ask them how they're doing if they've gone through our house process. And then after registration has opened for the upcoming term, and we look to see if that student has registered, if they don't plan to graduate. If we see that they haven't actively registered, we'll reach out to them just to get an assessment of what might be preventing them from moving forward and seeing if they need any additional resources or assistance to move them forward. So that's the cadence that we've established, that we have 2 touch points in the semester to connect with our students who are moving through the house process. How quickly will you respond to your students is something you'll also want to document in your SOP. You'll want to indicate where you're storing the information that you're collecting. Is it in your SIS? Will it live in a student file if you still have paper files? Is it going to live on a shared drive if you don't have a document imaging system? So you'll want to notate that as well. You'll also want to indicate if you're indexing your documents that you're collecting, what the storage program is, and the steps to execute that as well. Who all will be involved in the process, also called stakeholders, should also make its way into your SOP. So knowing people's roles and responsibilities to the process is helpful, especially if someone needed to step into the space as your backup or your successor. They then know who's the individual that's supporting the wellness aspect of it, who's the individual who's supporting the financial aid re-review or dependency overrides, who's the individual that's leading the food pantry space on your campus, and what that referral process might look like. So spelling all of that out and having those individuals also look over it and add or comment towards it can be very helpful. And then make sure that it ensures that everybody's on the same page. Another important piece is documenting the navigation of any systems that you're utilizing for your process. So I said earlier, we use Banner. There's specific screens within Banner that we store information on. And so I have screenshots of what those screens are and where the information should go and how the information on our forms should correspond with the fields within Banner. So just an example of how you can input that information into your SOP. So, as I mentioned a little bit ago, consulting with stakeholders is an important step, especially in the space of creating policy or reviewing policy. Here's a list of stakeholders that I work with that can act as a jumping off point for you. Consulting with these areas not only helps to provide a well-rounded support process for your students, it can also help to raise awareness of this important work as well. Here's where you can also, like I said, vet policy and have those conversations so that you're not creating policy in the back end, because that's a really dangerous place to be in. Your SOP should also define the purpose of the document as well as the scope. So again, using ChatGPT, I just, with that same example of the policy statement, asked it to create language for purpose and or scope. And again, jumping off from the original thought of the wraparound services, it then created this purpose. So to ensure all students have necessary resources, to meet their basic needs, promoting overall wellness and academic success. And then the scope, this policy applies, to all enrolled students at your institution. Just an example, you can make it your own, or you might already have one, but you could definitely refer back to this if you need a jumping off point. But I would say, keep it simple. Um, uh, Sometimes people overthink it, and we definitely don't need to write like a Shakespearean play. You just need to get it down on paper. If writing is your strong suit, that's great, but keep in mind that SOPs need to be digestible and easy to follow. Short is always best. But just be careful not to omit any needed information in effort to try to keep it short. So when thinking about an SOP, you'll also want to choose your format. SOPs can take shape in a variety of formats or a combination of formats. Most often you'll see text. Sometimes you'll see flowcharts, but another space that you can enter is video. I have made instructional videos on how to execute a process using Visio, and it allows you to create a step-by-step with audio. So it will be like your voiceover as you're moving through the process. And you can create like a little inventory of training videos if that's your jam. But if you don't have access to Visio, it's not necessary. It's just, again, might be a quick way to put some things together too, especially if you're struggling with time. Something else to keep in mind when composing a SOP is structure and making sure that it's clearly structured so that the ease of use is there. So some examples of structure using bulleted lists for key points, highlights, or non-sequential information. This will help you to emphasize important details, easy to scan to find what you're looking for, and best for listing features, benefits, and other general ideas. You can also structure using numbered lists for sequential steps or rank information. This will help you clearly define a process in a particular order. It also helps your readers to follow instructions step by step, and useful for procedures, rankings, and priorities. Another format that you can use is subheadings with short paragraphs. Makes it, easy to read, keep it short and sweet. Typically, you'll see short subheadings like introduction, key considerations. Um, just think of writing out an essay. But again, I emphasize keep it short. You can also incorporate tables. For example, I talked about navigating in Banner a little bit earlier, our student information system, and comparing that to the forms that we actually use. And so in my SOP, we developed a table that lists the Banner fields and the corresponding field on the form. So when someone's inputting that information into the system, they know exactly where it's supposed to go for consistency's sake, and it makes it easier then to pull that information out of this our system for reporting purposes. You can also incorporate checklists, which is really nice for like a to-do list. Like I mentioned earlier, we know to send out an email at the start of every semester. You can have like a little checklist of here's what I deploy at each point in time to get that information down. And then you also can incorporate a flow chart or a decision tree, which is really nice for process mapping and a nice way to present your process visually. So once you've done the hard work of getting all of this information documented, you then want to test it out. And what I mean by that is as you are walking through each step that you've listed, testing it out will then help to highlight if you've missed something. And then you can go back and revise. That's like the immediate use of testing and revising upon the initial creation. But with SIS systems, there's often updates, and sometimes your screens can change. And so there's some testing that's required with that that might force you into a revision as well. So just having a process in place for coming back to your document should you be in that situation. Or, just having someone else on your team walking through, especially a new hire that has a fresh set of eyes. It may make perfect sense to you, but having someone else take a look at it might be like, well, what am I supposed to do to get from this point to this point? And that can help, make your SOP a bit stronger as well. Um, and then you'll want to think about the approval and the implementation aspect of your SOP. In your SOP, you should also indicate who's signing off on it, how is it going to be distributed, and where will you store your SOP? How will you communicate where it's stored to individuals who are involved in this process? So all things that you want to spell out in your SOP. And oftentimes you can achieve that with using something like a version control table. As you are making updates to it, you can put your name and date that you made the update and what you've revised. But there should be a section that talks about the approval process too. And after each of those updates, a sign off that's happened that somebody has gone through and reviewed it and has approved it. And that could be in your department. It could be your supervisor if they wish to step into that space. But it's a good quality control practice to have someone else who's outside of the process taking a look at it and signing off on it. Um, and so lastly, ongoing reviews and updates are going to be critical. And I think many of us that already have an SOP struggle with this because of our little friend called time. So I did a little research on this important step for you as some tips on how to make this less of a struggle. One suggestion is to establish a review calendar. So you can set up a recurring schedule to review it quarterly or biannually or annually or every 2 or 3 years, whatever makes sense for you. because you might be in a space where your systems are not changing that frequently. So it may not be necessary to check it as frequently as others. Say, like my institution, seems like we have an update to our system every month. So a little bit more of a regular cadence is necessary. It's helpful to align your review cycles with your regulatory updates. And so many of us work within the space of audits, or you might have to go through like a program review of sorts. And so when you're working in that space, dusting this off and taking a look at it, it could be a practice as well. You can assign specific months or quarters that you and your team are going to commit to taking a look at this. You'll want to designate ownership and accountability as well. So if you are the house liaison, you can ask for help if you have a staff under you. And I know not everyone has the benefit of having someone reporting to them or a large team that has the capacity to work in that space. Um, but if you do or can get someone to support you in that space, um, assigning them some accountability so you're not shouldering all of the responsibility yourself. You'll also, or another suggestion is to integrate a policy review into your leadership meetings. And so, sometimes there's a call out for an agenda items, and you can say, hey, it's coming up on the time of year for me to review my house policy. I'd like to get this on the agenda for, this space to take a look at and review and offer suggestions. So another way, especially if you working with fewer staff and getting some additional support with helping you with your review and just getting some feedback on the process. Um, Using a version control and tracking system, as I mentioned a little bit ago, just to maintain a master list of all of your policies and the last time that they were reviewed. You can even take it a step further as to when the next schedule update is going to be. I'm jealous if you are able to get to that point. But again, a suggestion of how you can use a version control as a tracking system. You can use your calendars to set up a reminder. So, if this is something that you're doing annually or, every couple of years, set a reminder, for December 1st, for example, that will just pop up like a meeting reminder will that this is your time to review and update your SOP. And then you can also upline your updates with internal training and compliance audits. So every summer, I have to take a look at our house training that we've designed for our campus. And so this is an opportunity for me to take a look at the SOP. To integrate any changes that we might have made in our SOP and put that in our training for our partners that are taking those trainings in the fall. You can also create an escalation process for urgent updates. So if ever there were like a change to the act itself, or if there was a change in systems that you're using, that you have a process in place that guides individuals for how you're going to make those updates outside of a normally scheduled review cycle. And then lastly, encourage employee feedback and engagement. So ask your team, ask other offices to take a look at it and offer feedback, especially those individuals that are a part of your our wraparound services. And so, if you're in the space of wellness, but you're working with financial aid, just having a meeting with financial aid and just like, what is your it's always really good to get that feedback as you start to update your SOP. All right, so we'll talk about some resources and tools. Oh, I see I have a question. Are you able? Yes, I absolutely can share that. I've shared that with other institutions. And so I am happy to share that if you want to put your email address, I'll get that to you. Um, so resources and tools. Sometimes, like I said, the thought of getting started can feel really overwhelming. And I've mentioned various tools throughout this presentation that you can use, but I wanted to compile them all into one slide reference introduce some additional tools as well. Just keep in mind that there might be a cost component for your institution to use these, but you can definitely do a search for some free tools. However, just be careful with free versions. If your institution doesn't currently have subscriptions with some of these tools, because your institution will want to maintain intellectual property rights. And that is very challenging when you're using a free version of something. And so I would strongly recommend working with your IT folks when leveraging third-party tools to create documents on institutional processes that can be stored in a database outside of your institution. But intellectual property can get tricky really quickly. So keeping your institution in the loop before using any of these tools is highly recommended. Okay. So before I get there, I just want to do another waterfall activity in the space of AI usage. This is a very popular conversation right now. Does your institution currently have an AI usage policy or process? So go ahead and just drop that into the chat. Yeah, okay, so it looks like quite a few folks are in the works. Um, some say yes, no, okay. Updating it now, working on ours. Yeah, we had a process in place at Wabansi that we're required to go through before using any third-party process, or I'm sorry, any third-party softwares. Um, but we are working on an AI use policy as we have already integrated some AI use like chatbots. We have them on our campus. We have a subscription to Grammarly. Um, we also have a subscription to Canva, and all of those are AI tools. So we have a process, but we are in the works as well, working on a policy. It's up to the discretion of faculty. I'm sure more will come down the pipeline. Yeah, yeah. So definitely working in that space of AI use in the curriculum, right? And conduct standards. That's also a topic of conversation at our institution as well. So thank you guys. All right, so resources and tools as I promised. Just kind of break it down a little bit for you. For like the step-by-step creation software, Scribe, as I mentioned earlier, is a tool. There is a free version, but like I said, the free version does not allow you to maintain intellectual property. So again, please talk to your IT before launching into this. Document 360 is another tool, as is Stonely. For grammar check tools, Grammarly, WordTune, Microsoft Editor, and PaperPal are some recommended tools that you can use. As far as like AI assistance, looking up definitions or refining statements, things of that nature, ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, and Gemini are tools that you can research into using. And then for graphic designs, for those of you who, like your documents to look a little appealing aesthetically, you can use things like Canva and Looka. So yeah, I wanted to just share some resources with you that you could begin to um, research, but I can't stress enough to please work with your IT folks before utilizing these tools and referring back to your AI usage policies. And if you're in a space where your campus doesn't have a policy, definitely, talk to your boss if you don't know who to talk to about pursuing any of these guides. But when in doubt, you can always just, open up Word and just type it out and use snipping tool. Takes a little bit longer, but some of these things could help with ease of putting the process together. All right, so I'm going to open it up for some questions and discussions. What questions do you have for me? All right. Well, as you're thinking about that, I will share my contact information here, and that'll be a part of it'll be a part of this deck once Brittany shares it out with you. And then I'll also share that there is a part two to this training. So if you, are in the works of putting together your SOP and you'd like to come be a part of this interactive workshop, um, we can take a look at what you put together and offer some suggestions. And I could just kind of speak from the experience of what I've done with my SOP. But we'll be doing that on Monday, April 28th at 11 a.m.
Yep, and I just put the link to the registration for that in the chat. I am also going to put, again, the link to our House Liaison Center. That will be where the recording and slides from today will be posted, as well as we have additional resources and items on there also. Is there a way to get the recording? Yes. So the recording will be posted on that website. If you could allow me about 48 hours to edit and upload, it should be up there by the end of the week. And then I do also want to share, I'm not sure if this information has come out from IBHE and ICCB. I might be jumping the line here a little bit, but since you're all here, we will be working with IBHE and ICCB to host a house summit. So May 20th is when we will be doing that. I will try and get the save the date here in the chat, but that will be at the ISU Bone Center. And so registration has not opened up yet, but all of that information will be coming your way. But May 20th is the date for that.
Hi, Brittany. I have a couple follow-up questions for you and or Mary, maybe. That training you just mentioned on the 20th, do you by chance know like a start time? I'm just trying to figure if I need to drive up the night before or if it's like a 10 o'clock start time, that would be fine.
Okay, I believe we typically start that around like registration usually opens up at 8:30 and then we start off about 9 o'clock with a welcome.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Mary, thank you for agreeing to send these items. I am such a visual example. I am lost. I'm reading the chat. No one trained me. My transition was not great. So just to see some of those documents, it would be really great. So I don't know, Brittany or Mary, are there any other universities that you know of that have like rock star SOPs that should be like the one we aspire to be as I struggle to put anything together?
Well, I can tell you, Brittany, please jump in, that there is a house liaison guide that highlights a couple of other institutions that have put together an SOP that you could take a look at, and the components that really, made them stand out. But I would say, like, make the equity center, the ICCB hub, where all of this stuff lives, your best friend. The recordings go all the way back to when this act came out, and I have found myself going back just rewatching some of those videos as well. Incredibly helpful. Lots of great examples on trauma-informed care, on institutions that have, well-designed websites around these resources. And so all of that lives out into the hub. At least I think it does. Brittany, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, so I'm actually going to put, so the website itself was created as just a house and then we linked it up to our IL Equity website, but I don't know that it reconnects to it when you're on the house website. So IL Equity is the main website, and in that's really focused around career and tech ed. but there's so many resources in there on universal design for learning, trauma-informed care, and then it links you to the House Liaison Center, which has, as Mary said, all of the work that we've been doing with ICCB and IBHE over the last couple of years, with webinars, resources. I want to say if you go to there and you go under resources, there's the 2024 House Liaison Handbook. And so that has an amazing plethora of information and tools and resources under there as well. And this website in and of itself is really a living, breathing website. We are creating new resources, developing new materials, webinars, and uploading everything in there as well. So please feel free to check back, or if you have questions about anything and you come across something and think, hey, this would be a great tool to share with everyone, or we're wanting more information about X, Y, and Z, I will post my email in the chat. And then we work alongside Mary and Patty Zuccarello, who has done several webinars and trainings for us. And so we are always trying to figure out how we best can support all of the House liaisons.
Thank you. I know that seems so elementary, but I also got onboarded right after the last house training. So I'm excited to attend and hopefully learn more about what I should be doing appropriately. So thank you.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to be here with you all. And I look forward to our next workshop. So even if you have something already put together, just bring it. I'll showcase mine too. I kind of varied away from showing the SOP because I didn't want this to be like this is what my school does, but it'll be a little bit more of that on the 28th.